All right. Welcome to a new episode of, actually, you know something? I think we're hitting episode
49.
49, right?
Yeah, we are hitting episode 49. Next
Yeah.
week, I won't be here, but it'll be number 50.
Oh, yeah, we're
I'm
going to
like,
do it without you.
sorry to miss that. I'm
Anyway,
going to go back and have Allison renumber them just for that.
all right, let me rewind. Welcome, everyone, to a new episode of Raw Take for CEOs. Today is July 7th. I hope everyone had a great 4th of July, long, well-deserved weekend. Did you do anything this weekend?
Here in New England, it was pretty cold. I think we had a record low actually.
Dude, I have
on
mushrooms growing
Saturday.
on my grass.
But
There's so much
it was
rain.
a nice weekend. I'm actually enjoying reading some history about our U.S. process of getting to Independence Day. So that was kind of enjoyable for me.
Wow, you actually read a book?
I did.
How do you have time? Question. Big time.
Good question. Between the four kids and the century plus old house, find some time.
I think Steven's just kind of preparing himself for vacation come Saturday, plus his 41st.
Christine did ask
birthday.
me, like, are you taking a book on vacation? I was like, when am I gonna have time to read a book? So
That-
same question. But no,
Cool.
it's hope everyone had a great 4th.
Yeah, it was a rainy 4th and didn't really do much. I got asked a few times, did you see any fireworks? Nope, no fireworks.
I heard a bunch of them.
Heard them. I would say this is probably the first 4th of July, really just kind of stayed low. So that was good. It was nice to do nothing and totally disconnected. But kind of looking forward to vacation time too.
Yeah, last week we talked about vacations, talked about people, talked about like the second half of the year.
Yeah, people are tired, right? I mean, I just was on the phone with a customer and talking about the pipeline. The sales pipeline is full. There's backlogs everywhere. Backlogs we haven't seen in months. Sales pipeline looks good. However, just getting potential leads to sign on the dotted line, taking that extra step, finding the time to jump on a quick call. The leads are coming in and they're there. It's just I would say converting. And I think part of it is July, and I think this is summer of 2021. You know, I think we're trying to make up for the lack of summer of 2020. But anyways, it is July, and today is all about budgets, forecasting, planning, a little bit of demystifying. But
yeah, we're going to take a little bit different angle. You're going to run through it, Dan, but you hear from us all the time. It's all about planning. I mean, back in a year ago, one of our taglines was planning is back in vogue. Like who planned for the pandemic to hit last year? There were very few. We had a few stories that we can say people had their quote nuclear option and they pulled the trigger on that. But most people were not planning for that, almost rightly so. But planning was back in vogue. So you've heard us talk about a lot about planning, and today is more of that, but it's actually a different angle. Some of the kind of challenges, maybe speed bumps that we have seen in some of our customers as they go through the evolution of growing as a business, as a founder, as an entrepreneur, and how the evolution of planning goes along with that.
yeah, I kind of take maybe my appreciation and understanding of planning maybe a little for granted. And part of it could be my years of experience in middle market companies, Fortune 100 companies. Budgets were important. Budgets were important for people, especially if you were on bonus programs. Budgets, my first job out of college was in sales, international sales. And well, with any sales job comes budgets, right? You got to hit those numbers, annual numbers, monthly numbers. You bring the evolution of the monthly recurring revenue and ARR, and that brings a whole other twist and level of complexity to planning. And so planning for me is, we're sort of fortunate at times. We say, we are fortunate that we know that we're just going to get it wrong, right? But it's not about getting it wrong. And we're going to kind of touch on some of the nuances of planning. It's not just a budget, but it also helps you. It's not just a goal, right?
Mhm.
But it helps you manage the business to the budget and bringing along those four things that we always talk about, the GL4 that we'll touch on briefly.
It's a good point you bring up there, Dan. Your comment was, I take it a little bit for granted, given kind of coming from sales. Sales has budgets, right? Targets, quotas. And if you don't hit them, there's very direct and clear feedback loops.
Yeah.
The other thing is you came from kind of the public market side of thing, and I think that's where the rigor. We talk about rigor and cadence, right? That's where the cadence and rigor starts, right? But businesses don't start there, right? And we have brought a lot of that cadence and rigor to our startups and small businesses in a way that they just have not experienced before.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's hugely valuable.
And so today's episode is all about the entrepreneurial journey into budgeting and what that meant when you were the freelancer, the solo entrepreneur, the just getting started,
Mm-hmm.
to your Series B, $15-20 million in the bank, and what does planning and budgeting mean for you? So let's kind of start off with.
Yeah, no, for me, like it was just 2 seconds on this,
Sure.
to help our listener. Like, where are we going with this, right? Because part of this is that 2 months ago we talked about some of the inflection points of startups, right? Some is how you get things set up, and some is like when you're scaling up and getting from that like 10 people to 20 people, right? This is kind of one of the same issues. We didn't highlight it then, but it's how do I think about budgeting and planning, right? Because the quote is, how do you manage the business to the budget? Meaning, how do I make sure that I allocate resources to hit budget rather than managing the budget to in line with the business.
Right.
And I think, going back to like that startup, how do founders think of planning? How do they think of setting budgets, right? The first things you do, it's like the back of the envelope. What can I take? Where can I take this idea? Like, I can take it to the moon, right? Even if I scale back and think a little more conservatively, I'm going to go out there and raise money, and I've got to sell the dream to investors.
Right. And you can take it to the moon, but there's a journey between here and the moon, and there's a lot of twists and turns. Part of the budgeting process is to uncover shortfalls in resources, even opportunities that you may not have thought about or had foresight into, say, 6 months ago. But here you are halfway through the year, you're hitting your budget, and there's this big opportunity, but it's going to require X amount of capital to feed into the working capital machine to go after that budget, or you need to go hire a new customer onboarding specialist, et cetera. So it's not just about managing risks, but it's also about how do if there's an opportunity in front of me, how can I afford to capture that opportunity?
I think early stage, people, founders, entrepreneurs, when they see that opportunity, they're just going to build a new plan. And that is the new budget. We'll talk about kind of plans versus budgets, but early days, you are super agile, looking at opportunities, looking at risks, and you're going to build a new plan every 2 days sometimes, right? Based on new information, opportunities you have in the market, investor interest. If you have an investor that's willing to give you $500,000 to do your current plan, great. If there's somebody willing to give you $5 million to do something new, you're going to build a plan and create a budget for that. So early days, people are very agile, right? And they're adjusting their budget on a too frequent basis for the corporate cycle.
So let's go back to the evolution of budgeting for entrepreneurs. So when you started off as an entrepreneur, you're probably doing some consulting. It was one-off. Maybe you find yourself a business partner, kind of started the journey together. Really, the budgeting process back then, if you will, for solo entrepreneurs, freelancers, it's really about making enough money to pay for your personal expenses, whether it's your mortgage, putting food on the table. And so there are some personal budgeting experts that are out there that say, hey, don't start with your salary, your W-2. Start essentially with how much money do I need to put food on the table? And now you can begin to build from that, because that is your budget. As you begin to grow and you bring on more customers, you start hiring, you're building out teams. I'm not talking going from 1 to 50 overnight, but even from 1 to 5, And those 5 individuals, you could have a product development person, you could have an administrative assistant, you could have onboarding specialist, to sales and marketing. Each of those individuals, well, what do they want? They want to know, what are my goals? Okay, great. So now you have their goals, and their goals have to roll up to your budget, right? Why? Because at the end of the day, you have to hit a certain threshold of your budget to make sure you have enough capital to continue the plan. So when we talk about budgeting, I like to think about budgeting to solve these 4 issues. 1, cash flow. Every plan needs capital to execute. 2, a budget helps me understand where I'm making and where I'm losing money. And where I'm making and losing money it's like losing money isn't the negative piece, because I could be investing in a team, a product development, or I could be going into a new market with new salespeople. But it's important to understand where I can expect to make and lose money over the course of the next 12 months or 3 years. The third piece is I have to hit my headline number, right? That's your revenue number. And understanding the whole customer journey and conversion ratios, assumptions, that's important, because that's going to help inform whether or not you're actually marketing for profit versus just marketing for revenue. And then the fourth piece, which goes back down to the team, a budget's just a line in the sand. And people need to have direction. And so setting a budget and rolling that budget down to teams, functions, products, SKUs, services, whatever, customer segments, geographic regions, that's important, because now you begin to create not just alignment, but accountability, right? You've got a responsibility with accountability at the team level. And that fourth piece, of course, is pay for performance. So if you can not just pay people to show up, but affect their behavior to ultimately hit your budget numbers, that's the whole notion behind managing your business to your budget, not the other way around. This notion of I never hit my budget, that's not a budgeting problem. That is an execution problem.
Right. And I think, that the last one of the GrowthLab 4, paying for performance, I think in the early days, as you hit on, when it's just about putting food on the table, right? That is your budget, and that is your pay for performance, right?
That's your performance.
I put food on the table. Anything above that goes into the pocket, and that's the pay for performance. But as you grow, you grow with those team members, you grow the functions. You need to be able to put together programs, policies to pay for their performance, and they need to clear, and we're huge fans of simple pay for performance structures that are aligned with your budget, so that you're aligned with the corporate goals, but individually by a function, they are motivated financially, organizationally, culturally to achieve the same goals.
Now, there are a lot of ways to build a budget, to build a forecast, but we're going to talk a little bit about, how do you build a budget? And ultimately, what is that purpose? And we sort of talked about the budget being that line in the sand. So how do you go about building a budget? Well, it all depends on the maturity of your business or the type of revenue model that you are executing towards.
Let's kind of take 2 angles. One is kind of like more of the startup that is building something, growing fast, might have a little bit of history, but not too much. And then another one being more like mature business, still has growth ambitions, but has 2, 3, 5 years of operating history that they're in their current business model.
So, I mean, you'll hear me say if I were to have built an income statement, the first line item would not have been revenue; it would have been my marketing budget, right? And so you're a startup, you're thinking about product development. So I like to approach budgeting and forecasting for startups through a series of roadmaps. And I like to look at product development roadmap or tech roadmap. What are the hurdles? What are the outcomes? How much capital does it need? Your sales and marketing roadmap, also a critical one. How many people do I need? What's the technology behind those people?
Knowing the customer journey, how do these people affect buying behavior of your target customers?
Yeah, and so budgeting for startups without revenue it really comes down to more, the uses of cash versus the sources of cash. It doesn't come down to revenue, is what I meant.
Yeah.
And so building out a revenue model for a startup, it's usually later on, year 2, year 3, as you're thinking about your addressable market, conversion rates, lead generation, is it e-commerce, advertising, and building a model. But to me, that's not really a budget. To me, that's a longer range plan. A budget for me is your annual operating plan, which is the next 12 months, this fiscal period, because that is how we manage. We don't manage a business based on trailing 12 months. Or not trailing, but forward
rolling
12
forecast,
months. Because people are not being compensated on a rolling 12 months. They're really being compensated on a fiscal year performance or fiscal period performance, quarterly, monthly, yearly.
Yep.
So,
yeah, and I think we'll get on to that mindset of what is the budget versus the 12-month rolling forecast, because both of them have a role to play. But the budget is the budget. It's a line in the sand. We call it a line in the sand because you are going to measure things from it. It can change. We're big proponents of, this time of the year, about a month ago, been doing a lot of AOP primes with our customers. You've seen where you've been for the first half of the year. Let's make adjustments to be able to hit plan second half of the year. If we're low on revenue, how are we going to adjust so we can still hit those revenue targets, right?
Yep. And so let's talk a little bit about the annual planning cycle, because that's really what this comes down to. You do pick a 12-month period. Usually it aligns with your accounting period. And you're entering into a year with your budget. Usually the first 3, maybe 6 months, depending on your business, is sort of, in the books already. And then you got the outer 6 months, the second half of the year. You're coming into the half of the year, you're updating your budget because you've experienced 6 months of actuals. But that doesn't mean on a monthly basis, you can't be updating your forecast. Updating your forecast or revisiting your forecast twofold. One, kind of helps you understand why you missed, what are the variances, why you missed, why you captured more. Are you pulling in revenue? Is it unforeseen opportunities? Now, and then and sort of with that updated forecast, now you can begin to answer questions like, hey, do I have the resources, the capital, et cetera, to continue on this path?
Yeah, just playing that out, right? Like this time of year, people are looking at, here's my budget, here's my budget targets for revenue for the year. I've got my 12-month forward-looking rolling forecast, and my 12-month forward-looking rolling forecast tells me that if I do the same as I did in the first 6 months of the year, I'm going to end 2021 with $100,000 under my budget on revenue. That's a good application of the 12-month forecast, versus your budget. That means I need to do something now to try to make up for that delta.
Yeah. And so, okay, now we're halfway through the year. And if you've aligned your budget with people's expectations, or vice versa, actually, again, managing the business to the budget, if you've aligned your people's expectations and goals to the budget, that's, that 6-month halfway mark is important, because it's almost like a reset versus your monthly forecasting is not a reset. It's just, it allows for some agility in shorter term decision-making. I feel like the half-month reset is a good time for people to come back to the table and say, hey, we sandbagged the first half of the year, or, hey, we're coming up really short, either on cash or profitability. That's another thing we should kind of talk about, is the difference between an accrual-based budget, right? And that's sort of your GAAP, revenue recognition, right? That allows you to see trends. But then on the flip side, what's also really important is cash, right? So you don't always extract your cash needs of the business or cash sources of the business from normal budgeting process. So it's important to not just have your accounting budget, if you will, but it's important to have a cash budget that or a cash forecast that comes out of your budgeting plan.
Yeah, even if it's a simple kind of not a full-fledged cash forecast, but what are my adjustments to cash from my P&L and on my balance sheet? What are the cash impacts of things I want to do with my balance sheet over the next 12 months.
All right, so let's jump into how to start building and thinking about budgeting. So what's where do you start?
Usually
thinking about budgeting.
think about your P&L, right? Because your P&L is going to drive your budgeting. Where am I going to make money? Where am I going to use money? And then, once you have that all finished, I'm jumping ahead here a little bit, but then you can deal with like some balance sheet issues. Like if I have extra free cash flow, what am I going to do with that? But we start with revenue, start with the top of the P&L. How am I going to drive revenue? What is my revenue performance going to look like? If I've got history, I've got looking back, is it, how is my revenue going to grow over the next 12 months? What are my expectations? What is the economy doing? What is my industry doing? How are consumers going to react to my product in the next 12 months? All of those things impact what you think you can do in terms of revenue.
So I'm going to be a little more tactical. When I think about budgeting, I try to think about it from two approaches. One, the company level, top down. What are the numbers I need to hit? How much cash do I need to generate? How much cash do I need to raise to keep this machine rolling beyond the next 12 months? So I've got the top-down approach. This is what it takes to cover my fixed costs. This is what it takes to generate excess free cash flow. And here's what I'm going to do with this excess free cash flow. If I don't have excess free cash flow, then I'm probably going to have to go out and raise capital to continue executing on this plan. And then I take it from the bottoms up. Because again, at the end of the day, I believe it comes down to people. If people are not responsible for hitting certain goals, they're not accountable for it, they're not paid for performance, then a budget's only as good as the piece of paper it's written on. You need the execution piece of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the only way that happens is not just simply by pushing numbers down, but also gathering sort of meeting in the middle.
For sure.
But at the end of the day, it still comes down to the company numbers and pushing those ultimately down to the teams to ensure that they're executing and or they're planning for additional resource build outs for their team to hit those budget numbers.
Right. And to kind of take to our business, right? If we said, revenue for the accounting business should be 2x this year from last year, but I haven't actually budgeted or done anything to hire more team members, I'm probably not aligned, right? We need, it's one thing to just set revenue targets. It's another to say, here's how I'm going to staff that or resource that or drive that revenue.
And so one of the ways I like to ensure that the company is managing to the budget is having feedback loops along the way. And I don't think you need to wait until the end of the year to kind of go back and say, hey, we didn't have budget. It's got to be continuously communicated. Here's what we told you, here's what ended up happening. So what was the purpose? What's the why behind the variance? And then that gives you enough time to maybe adjust expectations, push revenue out, pull revenue in, hire resources, smooth out resource allocation, et cetera. So having those feedback loops, so whether it's weekly scorecards, weekly check-ins, not waiting until the end of the month to essentially throw your hands up in the air and say, hey, didn't hit budget again. And so I think if there's one key takeaway, and I know this is not the most exciting topic, but if there's one key takeaway is planning and budgeting has to be part of the core DNA of the business. Otherwise, everyone's just kind of flying blind. There's nothing to rally around. Sure, you've got your customers, you've got your product to rally around, but that's great in the beginning. But ultimately, in order for this thing you've just built to kind of stay together, the rallying cry is really like pay for performance, sustainability, building out the scaling of the business, the team, et cetera.
It comes back to making your budget, your budgeting, your setting of expectations part of your management framework. And as you grow, going back to that evolution of an entrepreneur, as you grow, you need to change your management framework. It's no longer just yourself and a business partner, just in the trenches together. You've got to make sure that you have the ability to align a whole team and to communicate with the whole team. And it's not as easy as turning a speedboat. Sometimes it's more of More of a Titanic.
Yeah, and I don't think it's when we talk about team, it's more than just one function. It's got to be everybody in the company, from sales and marketing to production to R&D to finance and accounting, et cetera. So that said, I think, if you haven't like really taken a look at your budget, your planning, think about it through the lens of those 4 challenges that most small businesses have. And that's the cash flow, the making of losing money, where is it all happening? The marketing, like making sure that you're maybe not leaving money on the table, making sure that, you're not acquiring customers that may not be the perfect fit.
Profitable.
And then, the last is alignment, right? Paying for performance. And we talk about pay for performance, but pay for performance creates team alignment if you've got the right organization and the right culture. And so with that said, for those who have not checked us out on Clubhouse, we do have another Clubhouse edition tomorrow, and it's in the startup room in the Clubhouse.
Speaking of one of the
we're going to be
GrowthLab 4 marketing.
And we're going to be talking to a couple of folks in the digital marketing world. So we're going to sort of swap hats from finance and accounting and numbers and strategy, and looking at it more around digital marketing and the importance of digital marketing today. We talk about core competencies. I truly believe, like, companies that want to be around, expect to be around, digital marketing is just a capability that you need to start really bringing into the fold. So
that's happening tomorrow.
Tomorrow,
July 8th,
5:00.
5 o'clock. If you're listening to this after that, don't miss the next one that we do. So message us and we'll make sure we notify you when we're next on a Clubhouse.
Cool. All right. Well, happy birthday. And
Thank
enjoy
you.
your vacation.
Talk to you audience after.
Thanks, everyone.